Afternoon, Tim. How you doing?
Afternoon, Shaba. I'm very good. How are you?
I'm really well and looking forward to what is our New Year's special
New Year's
episode.
special.
Yeah, we've got a New Year's special where we're going to be looking back at the episodes that have launched in 2025 and just picking out our most memorable ones and the sort of takeaways from each of those episodes to propel us into 2026 with the idea that we can use these favorite episodes of ours and the messages or the lessons that we can take away, and they can almost act like resolutions of things that we might be able to incorporate into our life. So I'm really excited about this. We've discussed it and we've picked out our favorites, but anything you want to say before we kick off?
I think just that, but we're hoping this is useful both for long-time listeners and maybe new listeners. If you haven't listened to the episodes that we mentioned, go and check them out because we think they're all good ones and there's a lot in there. We'll summarize them pretty quickly. But whether you have or whether you haven't listened to the ones that we think are particularly meaningful or just some of our favorites, each one's kind of giving a new pointer or a new step in this money work. So yeah, we're going to kind of create some sort of New Year possibility or new resolution based on each one. But I think we're going to try and get through 6 today, so they won't be in depth. And hopefully that encourages people to go and listen or listen back to the ones we mentioned. So yeah, where do we start? Shaba?
Right, let's start from the beginning. So episodes 2, 3, and 4 were the ones where we introduced the work and a focus on the 3 money movements. So take it away.
The fundamental money movements. So the work, we mean the whole body of money and life work that we're exploring in all these podcasts. And for those who don't know, that was originally kind of created by this guy, Peter Koenig. We mentioned him in many episodes. He's a friend, a mentor. We're going to get him on early 2026. To talk about the work. And what we say about the work is, on one level, it's universal, right? We all get tied up with money in the same way, deep down. And it's also very individual. We've all got our individual hang-ups with money, very personal, based on our personality, our upbringing, etc. And in the middle, and here's the takeaway of episodes 2, 3, 4, in the middle, there are sort of three or four main movements with money we tend to do based on what types of emotions and qualities we're tying up with money. And at this point, if you have a video, watch the video. Otherwise, maybe Shaba, you could describe what I'm doing. So money movement number 1 is this.
The grabbing.
I'm grabbing, I'm reaching out and grabbing. And part of grabbing is when I've got it, I'm
holding on to it tight.
Yeah. So money movement number 1 is grabbing money and holding on to money and wanting my pile to get bigger. And what we basically explore, I think that was episode 2 from memory, is insofar as I unconsciously tangle or tie up some positive quality with money, I'll keep chasing money. I'll keep getting more money as far as I can. I'll find it hard to get rid of it. And none of that will actually give me the thing I'm really looking for, because the thing I'm really looking for ain't in the money. So for example, if I think money is freedom, money is success, money is power, money means I'm a whatever, successful man, creative, sexy, blah, blah, blah. I'm tying up part of my human nature with money, and then I will grab. I won't know why I can't stop. And then I will hold on to it. Then the second money movement, I think this was episode 3, is the opposite. What am I doing?
You're pushing it away.
I am pushing it away. And if it comes to me, just getting rid of it.
Yeah.
So that might be spending very easily, not being able to hold on to money, kind of getting rid of money. Generally, if we have negative views of money, and we talked in that episode about different subcultures or ideologies, maybe religiously or environmentally or politically, I think money is bad. It's a sign of injustice, greed, all that's wrong in the world, etc. I find it quite hard to have it or hold on to it. And so I will often get rid of it. My organization will often feel under-resourced. I might feel under-resourced, and I'm unconsciously getting rid of it. And I might think I'm very generous, but actually I'm not being generous because I'm just driven to get rid of this yucky, dirty, evil, problematic stuff. So that's the second movement. And then movement 3 is when we're doing a bit of both. And it's either, we call it the roller coaster, I have loads and then I lose it. And then I have loads and then I lose it. And so I can get it, but I don't hold on to it. Or more common, we have this kind of slightly stuck, paralyzed, sensible
Guardrails almost.
guardrails. Yeah. Where I'm all right, but I never get too much. I never kind of really open up to more coming or charging more, or radically increasing my money. But nor do I take risks or invest my money in my life or travel or even making more money because I don't like to lose it. So it looks sensible, but it stays a bit guardrail and a bit limited. So those were the 3 money movements. There's a lot to say. Listen to the episodes. And really, we were introducing this idea of starting to notice which movements people typically make and understanding themselves and those around them in terms of those. Anything to add to that brief description?
No, I think it's really important for people to just start to acknowledge maybe which movement they're, carrying out in their day-to-day lives and just becoming aware. I think that's the first step. Or just noticing that, okay, yeah, I am tying up certain things, in money, which, having that realization that, oh, actually, yeah, I think money's going to bring me success and power. And then there is that unconscious kind of grabbing. I'm always thinking and trying to accumulate. I think that's a massive thing for 2026.
Yes.
To try and recognize.
Great. So yeah, that would be the takeaway. Just notice your movements, be interested, listen to the episodes. Are you more of a grabber, a pusher away, a roller coaster, or a guardrail?
Yeah.
And to recognize, and you said it there, I might chase money forever to get power and security, but to notice, do I ever really feel powerful or secure, no matter how much money I get? And to start to notice, well, maybe I don't. Maybe I've got more money now than I ever thought I could have, but deep down in my gut, I still feel shaky or a little bit vulnerable. That's because the thing we're associating with the money is never in the money. Right, next episode.
Episode 6, which was about my last Christmas buying frenzy, shall we say?
Yes.
When I got the opportunity to do some bargain shopping, and I got lots of nice stuff, and I ended up buying a pair of socks, which must have cost, 6 or 7 quid. And it caused me all sorts of turmoil because there was a projection which you can go into and explain what actually happened, because we introduced this idea of reclamation work. But let's just say that the purchase of the socks started to leave me feeling really, really quite sad and down. And I couldn't work out what it was that was haunting me about the socks. So take it away, Tim.
And then by the end of the episode, we'd worked out what it was, hadn't we?
Yeah.
So yeah, episode 6. So for me, that was one of my favorites, I think, for 2 or 3 reasons. Reason 1, because it ended up being quite touching. You were a bit surprised, almost quite emotional. So what I liked about that, and this is what I'm offering to people for 2026 in their own money exploration, is it doesn't need to be a big money story, a big event, a big trauma, for us to learn a lot from it. So we started with something that almost seemed quite trivial. You bought some nice sweaters, you bought a few extra socks, but you felt sad about the socks. But that led us somewhere super interesting. So for 2026, what I'm inviting our listeners to do is notice, be curious about even small money behaviors. As long as they have a bit of a feeling or emotion, they can lead you somewhere really interesting. So that's one thing I loved about it. The second thing is noticing that small thing. It took us a while to understand what was really going on. So we did, this is the second stage of the money work, we did what we call detective work. And I don't remember the conversation in depth, but I was like, well, if the socks had been even cheaper, would that have been okay? Or why did you feel okay about the sweaters, but not? We had to kind of spend time being curious about what was going on. And this introduced into the podcast what we call detective work. When I just become curious that what I think is tied up in money, or what's obvious to me about having money, losing money, spending money, wasting money on socks, it's not really reality. It's actually reflecting back part of me. So that's the detective work. And then we realized, I think for you, and it would be different for different people, that for you, there was something about, oh, well, maybe I just kind of splurged. I got carried away. I wasn't being conscious and intentional.
Yeah. And that's
And there was,
the judgments that we make about ourselves,
right.
which lead you to feeling. So I was feeling sad and I didn't know why, but there
Yeah.
was some sort of judgment around being irresponsible, frivolous, that kind of thing. Because I have in my mind that I'm this financial planner who is quite meticulous and always smart and clever about money. And here I did something which kind of just went against the grain of
Yeah.
my identity. And that kind of just freaked me out a bit.
Yeah. So again, it's not the socks made you
No,
sad. Socks can't make us sad. And
no.
actually, spending money doesn't make us sad. It's the story we tell about it that taps into, as you said, some identity story. And in your case, if I kind of pride myself on being conscious, intentional, and sensible, and I notice, oh, I just splurged and got carried away, that got tied up with simply buying a pair of socks. But that tells me something about parts of myself that I privilege and parts that I think are bad. And in this work, and we called it a reclamation statement, and people can go back and listen to episode 6, we start to see how by exploring very simple money things, we can actually tune into some quite deep parts of our identity that just need a bit of space or permission or acknowledgement. And it's never about the money. They're all parts of us. So yeah, I love that episode. And the takeaway for people would be to do the same. I think I mentioned that. Notice where there's emotion around money for you this year, big or small. Notice that it's not reality and just be curious, like, well, what's really going on here? And if you don't know, write in and tell us, and we'll do some listeners' sessions, or we maybe even invite you on to do some work because the work can go quite deep, but in a very safe and touching way.
Right.
Right, next episode.
Right. So moving on to episode 7, which was looking at finding status in a hotel. That was the sort of the story that I brought in. And we did a bit of a deep dive into that. And it was quite apparent that, this time last year, so New Year's, I took a trip with my wife and I was looking for something in the hotel that I was staying at. I was looking for an element of status in the hotel that I chose. And I sort of realized that, yeah, you can't really find it in the hotel. But what I did find was an element of peace, tranquility, contentment when I simply just took a walk with my wife down the South Bank on a nice sunny day, and we had nothing to worry about. We were just in each other's company, and it was almost like for a moment I felt joy and
Mm,
time sort of stood still, and it didn't matter that we weren't spending money on going for afternoon tea in the Shard. We
mm,
were just walking over a bridge, which costs absolutely nothing. And
mm,
I think we took a selfie, and I just for that moment felt like everything's okay and I'm really happy.
mm,
And you had some great insights
mm.
on that, which are going to be a sort of a takeaway for 2026 in terms of the quality versus the quantity of time. So dive into
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, again, it was a lovely episode because you shared a personal story, which I think is always a great way in. First of all, quick shout out because we mentioned your wife on the podcast. She's also our podcast editor.
Yes.
She's a person that edit out all our kind of rambly bits. Her name is Naz.
No.
So hi Naz, and thank you and Happy New Year. And I hope you have lots of other beautiful, tranquil, content moments with Shabba this year as well, with and without money. And so, yeah, I mean, you've summed it up beautifully, Shabba. It was when you noticed the thing that you were kind of chasing or looking for, which was tied up not directly with money, but in the status that comes with being in the posh hotel or the super expensive afternoon tea. You caught yourself chasing an experience, and then you recognize you often do that, and then you get dissatisfied because you're not finding it. And then what was even more beautiful was you noticed just in a simple walk, you had the very experience that you'd been looking for with posh hotels and expensive teas. So this again reinforces this idea with what we call on this podcast, the money path or the life path. The money path, we're often very, very focused on quantities, amounts of money, how much we spend, how much we save. And we had the mistaken belief that the quantity, the amount of money, somehow relates to the quality, the actual experience that we're looking for. So we gave an example earlier today, with more money, I get to feel more powerful or successful. But it's not true. And what we need to look for, and this is my takeaway or my resolution for people, is those moments on the bridge where, whether there's money involved or not, the money's kind of neutral, we're present, we're open up, and then we have moments where I feel peaceful, I feel happy, I maybe feel powerful, I feel creative. To start to notice, when do I actually have that experience in my life, and to notice whether or not it's connected with money. And my suggestion is often it is not. So linked to this idea of quality, we talked about time, and we often think about time in terms of numbers and how much time, and this phrase, time is money. That's one way the ancient Greeks called that chronos, counting time, hours, productivity, etc. And then there's also those moments like on the bridge where just for a moment time stands still. It's timeless. It's about the quality of just being there. And we call that kairos. So again, in the life path, we're focused more on maximizing the quality, those moments. And in the money path, it's all about hours and hourly rates and all of that stuff. So invitation for 2026 for our listeners is pay attention to kairos, to quality, to those moments that support the actual feeling of life that you want. And notice when you're getting caught up in chronos or numbers or the chase for a certain number, whether it's time or money, because you think that will deliver what you want. And just be curious about that.
Yeah, that's a big one for me, 2026. I've recently found that just going out for long walks can be as good as a holiday for me personally. Just spending that time with Naz, walking in the fields not too far from our house. And sometimes when you really just have that quality time, it does feel like you've just been away on holiday. And that's the nice thing about focusing on that quality rather than it's got to be tied up with, spending a lot of money on a big holiday and this and that. And that's actually, you can find these moments wherever you are. So yeah, moving on to next one. Episode 11 was a real eye-opener for me when we started talking about my trip to the indoor climbing place with my daughter on a Saturday afternoon, and the frustration and almost anger that I was feeling that she wasn't taking advantage of the money that I'd spent on this climbing session, where she would literally, harnessed in, she'd climb up 3 or 4 rungs on the ladder and then just jump off, and she was just quite content doing that. And I'm saying, but you got to go higher. You got to go high, like get to the top. And I'm like, because we've paid for this, you've got to maximize the time that we've got and get to the highest rung on the ladder. And really all she wanted to do was do a few little jumps and then go and have pizza. And I was like,
I remember the pizza very well.
yeah. And I was like, damn it, like spent this money. It's not even like a huge amount of money, but the feeling and the what I'd say, the inattention that it caused. And we had a good chat about this. And so, yeah, what were the key takeaways from this particular episode?
Well, that it builds on the one with the bridge and the hotel, but I think you phrased it very nicely there. It's about noticing in how many areas of our life and work we are driven by some idea that we have to maximize the number or get value for money out of the number, whatever that means.
Bang for your buck. Is
bang for your buck, maximize a number. And we talked about you wanted your daughter to climb higher. Well, that's another number. Or because you'd spent, she should climb X amount or X amount of hours. So it's an extension of actually Kairos and Chronos idea. But what I like is, again, it really encouraged us, and this is my takeaway for listeners for 2026, to come back to our actual experience. Because what you noticed, because of your fixation on the number, climbing, value for money, you didn't have a great time with your daughter. And so what happens is when we chase the number because we think it means X, Y, or Z, or will bring us X, Y, or Z, actually often we get further away from the thing we really want. And when we can drop the chase for the number, so if you had been able to be present and just go, oh, she's having a good time and I'm with my daughter, and suddenly you actually have a good time, and then that's value for money. So it introduced, I think, two things. One is, and I invite listeners to think about this, how much am I unconsciously driven to chase a number? And sort of, is that actually delivering for me? Is that actually giving me what I want? And then it introduced almost the paradox that often it's the moment we give up the chase or the grasping for the number, we're more present to, if you like, the richness or the possibility or the kairos, the life path moment.
Yeah.
That was my takeaway.
It was beautiful to share that particular episode, because subsequently when I've gone back to the same place, I had a much better experience, and we just did what she wanted to do and enjoyed whether she wanted to climb or didn't want to climb. And there was no pressure of maximizing the number of rungs on the ladder. And it was just a better bonding experience. And I've tried to take that into all our interactions. So it's a really
Yeah.
good one for 2026. Okay,
Yeah.
moving on.
Maybe one more thing on that, actually. You had a brilliant phrase, rungs on the ladder. And it makes me think it's not just your daughter. How many of us as adults get focused on climbing the rungs of the ladder, whether that's, my salary increasing, my savings increasing, my career gaining in seniority? Nothing wrong with any of those things. But if by climbing the ladder, we get less in touch with what's actually important and we're just a kind of wound out bundle of stress, that's not great. We're climbing the wrong ladder. So this ladder idea, I think, is relevant to all of us. And just a brief shout out. We haven't had this as one of our favorite episodes, but we did shortly after there, I think round about, I don't know, the teens or early 20s, we did 2 or 3 episodes about parents and children with money. And they're worth listening to as well. So I think your conversation about you and your daughter got us really interested in two things. What patterns are we living out that we picked up from our upbringing? And then those of us who are parents, what patterns are we transmitting? And so people could certainly listen to those too.
Yeah.
All right, what's next, Sheba?
So episode 19, which was a bit of a touchy one on the theme of poverty. I mean, it was titled, Are You Rich or Poor? And it was, we'd focused a lot about money and wealth accumulation and tying things up with money. But I felt like we were never sort of like acknowledging the poverty that exists and also the grapple with, seeing poverty, on our doorstep, and how do we deal with that? And so we had a really touching conversation around, what's true richness and poverty. So do you want to give some takeaways from that?
Yeah, just to echo what you said, I think for me, I don't think we'd avoided genuine material or financial poverty. I hope we haven't. And I think all the way through, we've acknowledged that, we're talking about a wide spectrum of people with very different financial situations. But yeah, we wanted to dive in more into how does this work relate to people and the truth that there is genuine material and financial poverty there. I think where we got to, and I would encourage people particularly to listen to this because it's hard to summarize it, isn't it? We went quite deep and it was quite subtle. But where we ended up, again, it builds on the ideas we've talked about so far in this podcast. Yes, I can look at poverty as a number. So I can say if I'm earning below this amount, or if my income is below this percentile of the population, I am in poverty. And we are not denying that. And we're not saying we shouldn't collectively and as a society and politically address that. It's absolute outrage that people are still in poverty in still, I think, the 6th richest country in the world. We're not denying that. But what we also did is acknowledge on the life path, it is possible to be poor even with money. So there are many people, maybe the grabbers, maybe people who are fixated on money or have just had the privilege of being able to earn money in different ways. But spiritually, they might really feel impoverished, or they might have very impoverished relationships, or they might be getting their money doing something that for them is rather soul destroying and meaningless, and have a sense that they are wasting their lives. So I guess without denying material financial poverty, we broadened it to notice that even with money, we can be genuinely poor and in poverty, and that that's a real condition of today's society, and that that has consequences. Because if I am spiritually, relationally, emotionally poor, and I think the answer to what I want is in money, I'll just keep chasing it, and then I can't be generous or vote for tax changes or anything like that. So yeah, I think that one's quite deep, and I hope I've summarized it adequately, but it's not an easy one to summarize. But I think the takeaway for anyone listening to this, if you feel listening to this, I really have very little money, money is really difficult for me, would be to, and it's not to ignore that and not to deny that, but to consider ways in which you're wealthy, maybe in relationships, health, spirituality, faith, purpose. It's possible because our society ignores that. So often we ignore that. And if you're someone who's fortunate enough to have plenty of money or enough money, don't just project your poverty onto someone in the street or someone with no money. Be really honest with yourself as you start 2026. Which areas of my life are not rich right now? Which maybe friendships, maybe relationships, maybe my emotional well-being, and actually figure out how you can maybe move energy from, if you are just working and getting money, to becoming rich in other areas. So this was about richness and poverty with and without money.
Yeah, really touching. Um,
It's a big topic. It's a big topic, but yes, I'd love to know what people think about that one.
Moving on to the next one,
Yeah.
episode 25, which
Mm.
was centered around why does money feel so heavy?
You want me to dive in?
Dive
You want to
in.
say something?
No, there was nothing I wanted to add to this one, but
Hmm.
you go for it.
Well, I think in a way that's a bit of a meta episode, isn't it? Because we're not talking about a particular issue. We're talking about how do we approach money questions. And what I liked about that, I think that was after the summer, maybe September or so. My memory is, it's an important question because many of us, even when we're dealing with money, it just feels heavy, whether we've got it or haven't got it, etc. And it opened up this possibility, which is important in the money work, of if I bring real curiosity around money and I decide, well, all the stories I picked up may or may not be true, but I don't know, then it can genuinely be quite playful, creative, light to just explore and experiment with doing money differently. And that doesn't mean we're also not serious about money. And it doesn't mean, again, we dismiss things like poverty or the need to pay bills. But if I have to engage with that, why do I have to be serious all the time? So we talked about why we tend to get heavy around money. And I think the important takeaway for me is what would happen if we respect money and bills and society, but just get playful and creative and light with it. And I think that can open up a whole world of experimentation. How about you? What's your kind of memory or takeaway from that one?
Yeah, I think there was this whole thing about money being life or death.
Right.
And as morbid as it sounds, it's just like, yeah, money is really this heavy thing that has a cloud and everyone's constantly stressed and worried. And I think the bringing the playful side to it, and I think in some episodes we've almost said, well, how can you try and act out in the opposite way? So, if you're very serious around money, like what sort of experiments can you do to be more playful? And that can be with a very small amount, like to begin with, but acting out in the opposite way that you would usually do money. I think is a great way maybe in 2026 to actually run some money experiments. And I think, one of the things that I did was not necessarily in a playful way, but just trying to act out in a different way, was around the splitting of bills, and we did an episode on that, but just always feeling like you've got to be the one that offers to pay and, make a bit of a dance around, no, I'll pay, no, you pay, this, that, the other, and just being quite open and saying, actually, do you know what? I'd rather we split the bill today, which is being a little bit more light with the whole conversation, as opposed to it feeling like, an unconscious kind of dance that takes place.
Well, that's right. And I think where we got to, it's a good reminder. Anytime I'm just fixed and rigid in my way of doing money, it's heavy. And any way I can be fluid and flexible, including trying just to do a different thing, it becomes lighter. So yeah, exactly as you said, my takeaway for people this year would just be play with money. And I don't mean be frivolous, just do different things. And if you've got lots of money, you might play with larger amounts. And if you've got very little, it might be very, very small things. Maybe you buy a cup of tea for a stranger in a cafe, or maybe you go into a cafe and you say to the waiter, actually, I've got very little money. I wonder if you and the team would like to pay for my cup of tea today, right? I mean, so it doesn't have to be spending money. It could be asking for money
Yeah.
or receiving money. There could be many, many things. And just introduce an approach of curiosity, play, and realize when you're doing it, this is all what we call detective work. It's starting because you'll understand where are my edges, what feels difficult, what feels possible. And we quickly start to see that the world of money is much more fluid than we allow ourselves to see. And my final thing I'll say on that is that led us from memory into we did a whole series on spending money and different ways you can think about spending, including charging. And even the question of how do I charge fees could be quite playful or creative.
Yeah, that was definitely a really good series to dive into. So that's a wrap. Those are the ones that we've picked for 2025 as our memorable episodes to take forth into 2026 with vigor and curiosity. And so I think all that's left to say is Happy New Year to our listeners.
Happy New
And
Year. Thank you
and
for listening. Please
thank
tell your friends. Please like and subscribe and spread the word. We really want this to get out to people because we get really super feedback, actually. We get some lovely unsolicited feedback, and we know it's still only reaching a relatively small number. So maybe a final New Year's resolution for anyone listening is, would you share this podcast with 3 or 4 friends that you care about who you think would value it? That would be maybe a gift to them and certainly lovely for us.
All right, Tim, I'll see you next time.
Cheers. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.